Hey folks, Steve here with another Nations in Arms video. It's been several months since my last one, I'm ashamed to say, but if you've been following the channel, you know my life has been crazy busy. I'm in what will be probably the last 4 or so months of grad school, which are intense. It has gotten to a very stressful time period, both in work life and school life and family life and just trying to get through things. The intensity being broken up by my trip to Game On convention, Game On Con, earlier in February, and I've got plenty of videos up for that if you're interested to see kind of what all went on there. A lot of great game experiences, and of course, with the idea that now that I'm home and maybe able to game some more. I've got this game called Nations in Arms sitting in front of me that has been up for a long time, and we still have a lot of playing to get through before I want to move on. And this game is taking up a huge amount of space in my game room, and I do have a number of great games that I'd really like to play either on camera or just in the room itself. So I had debated possibly just packing up the game, but all the effort it took to get the game set up, to get all the counters organized over there, I just figured, okay, I'm not just packing it up. I still like the Napoleonic era a lot, and this is a pretty big, intense game. I should keep going. I should just keep going, and I should push through where I can and make progress. So that's what we're going to continue to do here, guys. So if you've been following along, this is 1795. I've gone ahead and I had already done the card drawing for this, and to be honest, it wasn't terribly exciting, honestly, and um, I don't see uh, anything too crazy happening there with the cards. Each side got a couple that are additive. Nothing again crazy to talk about. Production was pretty straightforward. Had some weirdness here where I might have accidentally overstacked and I just fixed it. So a lot of the French armies are down here just because they were on this defensive whirling maneuver, and so they're sort of getting set up again. The challenge is that what I see is just a really tough thing for this game right now, for the French even, is that they're really dealing with an economic challenge. So their production is nothing to ignore. They have pretty good production. Now our infantry are starting to get their bonuses. We have pretty good leaders. France feels pretty good. But gosh, even just Britain and Austria, just these two powers that are left in the first coalition, can just be rebuilding their armies, and it feels like they're building more steps than the French. So this is we're not quite at the point where we have Napoleon and it's the War of the Third Coalition and he's just going gangbusters on nations. This has been a very tight game the whole time where the French are just holding on just barely each step of the way to fend off the Austrians, to fend off British incursions, and it is pretty tricky. I, I would have to bet most times people play this scenario, the French would lose. Because I think the French have gotten very lucky when I look back at the previous videos and just how the French have squeaked out of it. Now, things will get even better for the French again over time. They're going to get access to their +2 bonus eventually when we get a leader named Bonaparte. He will be quite effective. And again, just to review something that I had noted early on in playing this, that the leader values tend to matter a lot, especially their initiative values, where if you're dealing with leaders who have the same activation rating, right? A lot of the leaders on the board right now have activation ratings of 3. It is very hard to force a combat unless both sides want to, because it's very easy for the defender to withdraw. Just the way that the numbers and the modifiers work out, it is easy to withdraw and pull back. Um, so, I think later when there are much better leaders like Napoleon, he negates some of that, or the better leaders will tend to negate the ability for the defender to withdraw and can bring armies to bear and force a combat where the defender probably wouldn't want them to. And that's how you really start to eliminate forces and armies, and you do all these things. So we're not really at that phase of warfare yet. And so it is, we're not seeing heavy penetrations by the French into Austrian territory, and it's been hard fought just to even get to where things are now. Um, the other aspect that I think is probably worth mentioning is that the French did technically conquer Holland and Flanders. Now, Flanders doesn't just become a French annexed territory because we're still at war with Austria. So it's merely garrisoned and held with the fortresses garrisoned by French units. Hence my discs here, if you guys remember the disc mnemonic. Having conquered Holland, and this is kind of a weird thing. I don't really quite get how this should work in this scenario. We've treated this as the French have put in their own government into Holland, and Holland is now a minor power ally to France. I think I played that right. I think that's the correct way to do it. It is just a little weird because I think the same leader that was leading the Dutch on the coalition side is leading the Dutch on the French side. So I don't know what you want to think about that. Someone with more familiarity with the game can help me. Let me know. But very generally, I think the thing that the first coalition factions have is money, but they have build limits, and so they're ending up with a lot of money that's going into building more ships as the British. Not that they need anymore because they do rule the seas. The minor factions are as built out as they can be, so there's a little bit of money wastage, honestly, on the first coalition side, and the Austrians can get a pretty crazy amount of money um, given over to them from the British. They can just receive um, loans basically or gifts. They can be gifted money, and I don't think there's any limit because it's the British doing it. So like they can just send over dozens of dollars or pounds or however you want to refer to it for the Austrians to just rebuild all their armies. So there's a couple of things in the warfare of this scenario where again the armies can get away from each other, um, and any losses that are taken, at least for the Allied side, can tend to be replenished to full. It's just where they're being built is what matters. So if the French are making progress in the Holy Roman Empire territories, the Austrians have less ability to get reinforcements up there, which gives the French a chance to kind of, hold and control those territories and start to maybe remove um, some of the advantage that the Austrians would have. But as long as the Austrians are operating close to home, they can rebuild their armies pretty sufficiently. Um, so there's a bit of a challenge there. Um, which means I think the Allies should probably want to be fighting because they're going to win the attritional battle. The French right now, for all their ability to rebuild steps, um, it always feels like they're not coming back quite to full strength. Each unit or set of forces are being replenished to a certain degree, but we also need to be protective. We need to protect against the British who could land somewhere over here, so we're always having to watch that. Um, and we've got really multiple fronts over here where it's like, well, there's the northeast front because the British still control Hanover, so the Dutch and the French forces here are going to have to contest the Hanoverians. We also have sort of this German front, which right now has a potent Austrian army that is recovering, but is going to be reinforced by a number of these minor states in the HRE that are aligned with the Austrians. So we're going to have to swing an army up here to sort of defend that again. Constant defense up here. And then the Italian front is interesting. We do have some forces here. Piedmont has a unit back. There's a force here that's trying to hold the line in Italy. Got some minor reinforcements due to the army reinforcement rules where you can get a couple steps back. And then there's going to be fighting in Italy, obviously, no matter what. I think at some point. But the thing is, the Austrians just rebuilt a gigantic army with Teschen and even some forces with Württemberg over here, where they're just spitting out steps. So I think it's still going to be tricky. And what I'm worried about as I'm playing this is it's starting to become a little monotonous, where maybe in the proper Napoleonic period, where the armies are maybe more capable. There's better leaders. You can maybe do a lot more there's a lot more going on. Here, it's a very grindy sort of affair where we're fighting over the same territory. The fights are going back and forth, and then we're just re-racking every single year. Now, the critical thing, obviously, was that Prussia and Spain got knocked out, which changed the nature of the war. But now that we're in this sort of Austria and Britain versus France grind fest, it's a little less interesting than it was. Now, granted, I'm only coming back to this game after months of being away from it, so I'm hoping as I'm getting back into things, it'll be a little bit more fresh and enjoyable. But it was starting to be a little monotonous there. And of course, it's solitaire, so it's like, I bet it would be more fun all the time with an opposed game, right? With me trying to outthink my opponent. Here it is very chess-like. So, and if it's chess-like and attritional, it's a little less interesting than if it were more dynamic. But we just don't have the best leaders on the board to do a lot of that with. We do have Hoke still, and he's really quite good. There are some good leaders out there that can make a difference in how we're dealing with this conflict, but um, it's still, I don't know, it's weird to be back at it, guys. It's just a little weird to be back at it. But I did production for 1795, which means, and again, there's not really much diplomacy to be made here at this point in the game. So I think that's just going to bring us into the actual activation phases or the initiative phases. And so I will be loading up the cup. And here's what I think I'm going to do, guys. Because it's been a while since I played this, and really I just want to keep moving. I could jump in and show very detailed moves. I think what I'm going to do instead is try to just play through the season and show the aftermath of each season and not record everything that I'm doing, so that I can move through this more quickly, show the important stuff when it shows up, like when Bonaparte shows up, that will matter. But just trying to keep playing through it, because while I'm sure there are folks that really enjoy Nations in Arms, I do want to make sure I get a chance to show other stuff. And there's a lot of other games I want to be playing, guys, and that doesn't mean I'm disliking Nations in Arms. I've just there's a lot of stuff I want to hit, and so I'm going to try to play through quickly. Okay, here we are after the spring turn of 1795, and boy, it's kind of an interesting set of events. So the French had cleaned up Toulon, they took Nice, they were thinking they were going to get into Genoa. They also pressed here, took Turin, but that big Austrian army came up and just eradicated two French armies. It was a big battle, but it was basically an army group of two weakened French armies that really only had artillery going for them, and the Austrians just had too many guys, just the sheer weight of their stack. And the French probably should have retreated, and we didn't, and that was foolish. And they got wiped out, which really puts the game on a hard stance now, where the Austrians, can basically face off against one army down here in the south and potentially take southern France. However, here a siege at Hanover is going reasonably well for the French-Dutch forces, Franco-Dutch forces, and then the army of the north here actually soundly defeated an Austrian attack. However, the Austrians don't mind because they have reinforcements coming up, and they'll just crack them again, because now that the French are denuded of strength points, basically the path forward into France is starting to look better and better. So it's definitely a tight situation. Again, that's what I mean. Like it feels like a lot of the time it can be grinding back and forth. I absolutely should have retreated here as the French. I foolishly decided to give battle, and I didn't need to, and I did, and it's too late. I rolled the dice. The thing is, the Austrians rolled boxcars, basically. Actually, I forgot to roll for a leader there. He's fine, so okay. Well, yeah, so this could be, this could actually be the year that things get really topsy-turvy for the French, and they're going to lose out for this reason. Having lost those two armies is just absolutely freaking devastating. There's just no other way to spin it. That was very, very bad for them. We also had one of our better leaders get wounded in let's see, who is this? Kleber, 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 um, Kleber, who got hurt as a minor leader casualty. So um, what could probably happen is we could pull this guy back around. That depot's probably screwed. We could try to pull back out and just play elastic defense there with our remaining army, the army of Germany, which is down near Provence. And then, maybe the French can continue to hold a line. And if the Dutch do well up here, the British can't do much. Like there's a Neapolitan army headed north, which is going to be kind of a waste. The Portuguese don't have a whole lot to do yet. I'm trying to figure out what I want them to do because they're so weak that they're more of a distraction than anything, but they could pop over here and cause havoc. And the British are being careful because they don't want to leave the straits. They want to make a crossing, but they want to build up before they do that. And basically, I think the British are thinking that they need to rebuild their army. They had some disasters recently. They have one army that is decent strength that could try to make a crossing, but I'm thinking right now they don't do that and they wait another year before they come down with two armies invading navally and hopefully sealing the deal on the French. So they're really in a holding action while the Austrians make some penetrations and hopefully hurt the French cause severely over the next couple of seasons. So that, and the thing is, we actually had, just to show the chit order, the winter quarters got pulled twice, and then it got pulled a third time here. So we had Empire Land, Coalition Land, Empire Land, Coalition Land, Empire Land, which they couldn't do much with, and then winter quarters. So um, most of the major forces on the map are pretty much done by now anyway. So that's as good as it was going to get, I guess. I think there's certain aspects of the naval stuff that I need to be thinking about because I really do think that it would be advantageous for the Portuguese and the British to be making strikes along the coast. But that if you show up with only a few steps, you're not going to get very far because you need supply, and you can't go very far inland without restoring those fortresses, and you just don't have the steps to do it. So while I was worried that like amphibious invasions are overpowered in this game, I don't. I kind of I thought that a while ago. I don't think that's the case. Really, only Britain has the staying power to try it, and they can only do it, where there truly won't be any armies to contest them. Because again, like if you try, like the build limits of the British are low to begin with, so they're really only going to be able to build two full strength infantry corps and a full strength cavalry corps on any given year. And even just to land somewhere, attack, however many steps, survive the amphibious assault, which will be weighed against them. Then they have to try to replenish the fort or have supply depots with them to maintain their supply line. And then they're going to keep, trying to press inward. And when you're really talking about like a maximum of 6 steps, it won't be long before they're really out of gas. So they can make some critical strikes in some places. But that's why for like the British this year in 1795, they're just waiting to rebuild. They built a new army, but they're going to wait for more steps to build that army up. And then they'll worry about 1796 being a major year while Austria does what it can to exhaust the French. That's the coalition strategy right now. And I think it's going to work okay, given we just eliminated a set of army counters on the French side as the Austrians. So we will see what happens. I think the French are really wishing a guy named Bonaparte would show up, but it hasn't happened yet. I think he comes in. He can either come in via a card a year early, or you have to wait until 1796 for him. I think. At least that's the way I'm going to play it. So, all right, let me go take care of the summer turn of 1795. Okay, here we are after the summer of 1795, and I have to say it was a pretty eventful set of actions that, well, it went back and forth. I have to say, I think midway through the turn, I was thinking that the coalition was going to make way to win the game potentially, but it's not that simple. So we kind of had a number of maneuvering armies and battles around Genoa and Piedmont that, at the end state of things, saw Teschen's force, which was that big Austrian army, whittled away, and eventually was demoralized, and then was given honors of war at Turin, which means that, if the French can hold this position, and Jourdan only has um, one unit of cuirassiers, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So not much actually holding this territory, but assuming nothing else changes here, which right now, I mean, units are just too far away. Oh, I'm sorry, this guy should have moved again. 1, 3. He's kind of slow going. And he's okay for attrition. Anyway, it's kind of slow going, and I think by the time it matters, the Neapolitan army is just not going to get up here in time. So if they can hold out through the winter, Piedmont will be conquered and gone from the game. Genoa will be firmly under French control, which should give the French a really great leading uh, path to go towards Lombardy, Milan, the rest of the territories that they really need, like Romagna and Venice, potentially. So they're actually doing pretty good from that perspective because of this campaign. But in the mid-campaign area, you can see Wurmser. He's pretty beaten up as well. A lot of his forces have been hurt and removed, but he did force the French back into French territory. And then ultimately, what Hoke decided to do was pull back around because the British made a landing. They did decide to cross the straits. They defeated a French militia, but just due to their supply situation, they're going for Lille, but failed to take the fort, and they are besieging it. Meanwhile, Biron continues to hold down Flanders as a conquered territory, and the Dutch that are coming back over from Hanover are rushing as reinforcements to help shut the British action down. Now, the British might have tried to run for Paris. That wouldn't have meant that the end of the campaign would have ended or anything. And what maybe the French would have done is use Biron to cut their supply off. So again, we talked about it before, it's like in some ways you might think, oh, the British can just swoop in like crazy, but the reality is their force projection is limited, and I decided to go for it, and maybe really put the French off balance, but it just went a little bit differently. And I will say, the reason I thought the Austrians were going to do very well is that even in the fights they were losing, they managed to not get demoralized and had the potential to just wear the French out. But of course, they did at last fail a morale check and put them in a bad position. So because of the hot and heavy fighting of summer, I can't imagine autumn is going to be too crazy. There's only a few stacks on the board, and I think that is the weird thing with this game, is that maybe not weird, I don't know. I mean, this warfare time period was pretty attritional, that the armies just get worn down to the nubs, and you try to rebuild them again over winter. Um, but again, I had talked about, like, if the leaders have the same initiative score, it's very easy to avoid combat if you want to. Assume you're not going to get put out of position by simply retreating before combat or avoiding combat. You usually can succeed in that die roll, though sometimes you fail and you roll low. The other thing is, like, you still want to fight, because even if you lose step losses, like, you'd rather lose step losses maybe than territory sometimes, because you're just going to rebuild all those steps. Like, every power has enough income to rebuild most of their lost steps for the most part. The French are going to have trouble because they're going to have to rebuild army markers this winter, which kind of sucks for them, but generally they're still okay on that. So I don't know. It's tough, but you can start to see the French are managing to get things under control. And what's important for them is if they can get into 1796, they're going to get the benefit of their +2 on their infantry at last. The French have only been able to use a +1. But the special rules for the scenario will allow them to use +2, which will definitely make a difference as they're fighting off the Austrians and the British. So I'll take care of the autumn turn next. I do want to show quickly the honors of war that will come in next spring. There's some Hanoverians here and a few other units from the British, a whole bunch of Austrians, because that's actually what happened at Turin and a couple other places. They got honors of war, and even the French actually lost some units. Actually, I think these guys are wounded. Yeah, these are wounded guys. I will show that one of our better sub commanders died. So, oh boy, Desai, maybe is how you pronounce that. He's dead. So much for that. The number of dead leaders is starting to pick up over time. So yeah, there we go, guys. We'll do autumn 1795 next. Well, once again, I'm learning the lessons of this game over and over and over again. The British army was completely annihilated outside of Lille. So, with the very first activation of the season, the French got to go, and with a very intense wheeling maneuver, a French cavalry got around the British army that failed multiple interception rolls and took out their supply depot at Boulogne here, which allowed other forces to kind of move up around. And with the British army out of supply, they were able to attack the force even with reduced numbers, and we just managed to get into a situation where the British army was defeated. Now, the Austrians are making progress here. They took Strasbourg. They're going to be positioned for Metz, but there is a response force of Hoke's cavalry army that is a remnant, this freewheeling light cavalry, and the Dutch-French forces there kind of in front of France, kind of showing a defensive perimeter. The Neapolitans are up here in Milan, which kind of scares these French forces because they're so weakened. But it's very likely that the French could still win a victory against these guys as we start heading into winter. So it took the Neapolitan army a while to get up there, but they're kind of the last force available for now. So I'm going to take care of the winter turn. Yeah, it could be short if I. What's funny about the autumn turn here? It was a long autumn. I didn't draw the winter's quarter chit until the very last chit, so it was a very prolonged set of activations. But we'll see what else occurs here. Okay, just to show the brief aftermath, the French got to go twice, and the British coalition got to go once before winter quarters came up. So it was actually kind of a shorter turn there in terms of the chits that mattered this time. So the Neapolitans didn't get any further than here. So the chits that came out and the values actually mattered a whole lot because these guys could have tried to relieve Piedmont, but they failed. So Jourdan sets happy in Turin. We started bringing this cavalry down to reinforce before the end. Hoke, so the Dutch went back up to Flanders to hold it because I believe, and maybe I'm not playing this right, the capital has to be garrisoned to control Flanders right now because it's still considered Austrian territory that they haven't lost. At least I think that's how it works. So I have to keep somebody there, actually. And so Hoke did grabbed French infantry that the Dutch left behind, came over here, attacked Wormser, won a skirmish battle, chased after him. He retreated and fell back, and he ended up not being able to activate again this turn. So he had sort of moved forward to get ready. He should probably have an activation marker on. I forgot to put it on him. But basically, the Austrians got pushed back out, which leaves the end of 1795 in the military phase. The French have no enemies in their territory. They've maintained a strong performance. They continue, in fact, really, They are knocking out Hanover. They are allied, or they've subjugated Holland. Flanders is under military control. Piedmont and Genoa are under French control. I'd say right now they're sitting pretty happy with the game situation. They've defeated multiple coalition armies. The British have once again failed. I really thought for a second that they were going to be in good shape, only to find that once again, if you get a good initiative chit draw, and you have enough forces spread out, you can do some pretty nasty things to put an army out of supply. So many coalition armies have been destroyed around here due to the open terrain and the ability to maneuver, with the French still in supply and the Allies, the coalition, not in supply. So that's it for the winter. Now I'm going to take care of the the peace conquer phase, because I need to double check a couple of things, but we'll be wrapping up the video here very shortly. Okay, let's talk about a couple of special things that the conquest phase is going to bring to us. So, one thing is that the British could have been spending money to try to diplomatically influence Holland away from being a French ally. And I decided, because the British had money in the bank and I had forgotten to do that, I gave them 4 tries and they all failed, because you have to roll really high to actually shift the unit. So, because it's a French ally that is not a satellite, the coalition can try to sway French allies away, but they failed to do that. I don't really know if we can say that we've turned Holland into, um, uh, the sister republic necessarily, but something like it maybe is going on. We do conquer Hanover because we had its capital under a garrisoned fortress under control. Now, here's the thing with Hanover. Technically, Hanover now automatically gets reinstated because we can't annex it. It's too far away. Flanders is a problem with that because we don't ever really take Flanders permanently. It's considered part of Austrian home territory or something like that. And we're still at war with Austria. So we reinstate Hanover, but Hanover only has units if it's allied with Prussia or Britain. So while we continue to maintain control up there in the north, we won't get any Hanoverian units as the French. So it's just controlled territory. We've basically forced the coalition out of northern Germany. Baden can still create units and stuff. So this is sort of like there is a path for the Austrians to head north here. And technically, Wesel is still under the control of the Austrians because it is part of Berg, which is still Austrian controlled as part of the Holy Roman Empire, or allied, I should say, to the Austrians. But that sort of northern front is kind of shut down for the most part, especially with the British taking a smacking. They'll probably get another army put together, and the French will have to watch that, but they're going to be able to do so in a much better fashion than they had previously. Now, the other thing that happens here is that there's a kingdom of Piedmont, Sardinia, Piedmont. I'm not sure what the right way to look at that is. So, a couple of things. What I'm told in the rulebook is that when Piedmont is conquered, which it is because they have lost control of all of their territories and everything else, and annexed by France, which I guess we would say we're annexing Piedmont into France. Sardinia remains at war with France and becomes a minor country allied to Britain. So I guess for what it matters, Sardinia is now red controlled, not gray controlled, with my token mnemonic here. And then among the Piedmontese units, only the detachment is available. The Piedmontese corps and leaders are permanently removed from the game. So Sardinia can put a detachment over here. That lot of good that's going to do them. So we can basically say they're out of it. And I think we would say for Genoa, if that's considered a minor, and I think that it is, I think they get annexed into France as well. I think, if I understand it, I believe that Genoa is a distinct area, even if it doesn't have units necessarily. So we are going to annex it.
The resources and additional recruitment level will belong to the conqueror, and as such cannot build its own units. So this will likely affect and improve the French manpower limits and different things. I will have to double check, but they're basically picking up both Piedmont and Genoa, which will be important. And then it's going to depend on if they count as annexed territory. Does that mean we can build up units there? Because that's going to make it a lot easier to contest the Neapolitans there in Milan and everything else that's kind of going on right now. So um, that's going to be interesting to look at. I'll have to check that in the production phase and see what else goes on. Um, let's see. Yeah, annexing, creation of new states. We're not going to do that. Automatic victory check. I don't think that applies. But just looking at it again, we're reaching now the end of 1795, and what's the victory here? We need to control. France needs to control Flanders. Check. Holland. Check. Switzerland and Geneva we actually do not control yet. They're neutral. We basically just walk into those guys when we're ready. Nothing too crazy. Piedmont check, Genoa check, Lombardy and Romagna. So the French, we still need to get to the end of 1797, the last turn, which will be winter 1797. But the French need to hold what they've taken. They need to grab these, which I mean, this is you walk into that right, and it's done. Switzerland just has one fort, so this is we've left it go because it's just a barrier for the Austrians, and if the Austrians invade, then the French get control of them. So it's like there was a buffer. Now we can just kind of walk into it whenever we feel like it, basically. And then we just have to win the fight for northern Italy, which involves Lombardy and Romagna, which might not be a big deal, though Austria is certainly going to contest it as best they can. So I think right now, despite it looking perilous for the French for a while, I think they're on the upswing. They have a pretty good chance of winning a victory by the end of 1797, but it is going to come down to the next 2 years that are going to be interesting to see how they play out. So there you go, guys. That's 1795. In kind of a quick review, quick playthrough, trying to move quickly through the game. I will get to 1796 sometime soon, but it's been 4 months since my last video in this series, something like 4 months. So the fact that I have done this video 1795 means is the guarantee that this series is not dead. We are injecting some life into it, and I'll get to 1796 just as soon as I can. I appreciate you guys watching. Thank you so much. We'll see you in the next one. Take care. Keep gaming.